I don't know necessarily, or I don't want to say and predict that they're going to be able to, make the Eagles look like what they did against the Bucs last year. But it is something to think about, just because this is probably one of the better defenses, in my opinion, that the Eagles will face this season so far. So.
Countdown is on to game number 4 for the Eagles this year. They bring their 3-0 record to the link against the Jacksonville Jaguars and a coach they're pretty familiar with. Here to give us a Jacksonville perspective is a guy who covers them every single day for BigCatCountry.com, Demetrius Harvey. Demetrius, Jody Mac, John McMullen here on Birds 365. Thanks for streaming in with us, big guy.
No problem. It's a little bit early, but you know what? I'm up and I'm ready to talk some Jaguars Eagles.
Yeah, Demetrius, obviously for us in Philadelphia, it's got to start with Doug Pederson, which I imagine is understandable from your perspective. But after going through Urban Meyer and getting to the, I don't know what you want to call it, the professionalism of Doug Pederson, I said it was the easiest prediction for me that the people of Jacksonville were going to be thrilled with Doug Pederson. How thrilled are they?
Yeah, they're over the moon. I mean, you go from a guy who last year, honestly, was just demonstrably bad in terms of everything that could happen in Jacksonville in terms of the head coaching and just the player organization. The players were fed up. They were in a dark time. Doug Pederson mentioned, this team needed healing, and he was right. And, that's sort of what he brought along during OTAs, during training camp. And then now into the season, you can definitely see that there's a complete 180 in terms of the coaching style, the maturity of the team, the organization. Last year there were times where no one would know what the schedule would be from a day in and day out basis. Urban might leave early, Urban might arrive late. Just little things like that. Now it's an actual schedule. I think that helps. It's just the little things that you would expect to just come natural to any coach. Urban didn't have that last year, but Doug Pederson obviously has that. Yeah. He has the professionalism and he knows exactly what he's doing. So it's been great. I think that Jaguar fans are really excited.
Let me follow up on that, Demetrius, because we hear this phrase a lot, that you're a culture builder when you come to a National Football League team as a new coach. And certainly the culture would probably be described as toxic last year. Certainly not the case this year. Is there anything tangible that you can put your finger on and you'd say, all right, this is what they mean by culture change, the culture that is the Jacksonville Jaguars? I know we're only 3 games in, but Doug's been in place for months now. Is there one thing or several things, an overall thing that you could say, here's where the culture of the Jacksonville Jaguars is because of Doug Pederson, and that just was not the case before?
Yeah, I mean, you can see it in the little things, during press conferences, how the message is being relayed. Everybody seems to be on the same page. Last year, it was, this and that, and I need to do this, and he needs to do that, and Urban didn't really know exactly what was going on most of the time. So when you look at what Doug Pederson has been able to do, you can tell that this team has been bought into whatever message that he's putting forward. He comes in and I know everyone laughs about the ice cream and the things of that nature and the sort of easygoing, laid back mentality, but they're actually really they're really going hard. In practices, last week or it was either last week or the week before on a Thursday practice, they played 65 plays. It's those things and the ability to, or they want to work hard and to get on the field and actually have success and win football games. I think that's been sort of what's been changed in Jacksonville. Now, obviously it's only 3 games in, they could easily just lose the rest of their games this season and people would probably say the culture is terrible. But for right now, it just seems like, they actually know what they're doing. They understand the plan and the goal set by Doug Pederson.
Yeah, I mean, to get back to your schedule point, Demetrius, I always joke, if if you ask Andy Reid what his schedule is going to be on September 30th in 2026, he can tell you. He can tell you. And Doug comes from obviously that sort of mindset. So it is interesting, the little things and how they can change things. But to me, and I was telling Jody before you popped on, the greatest accomplishment of Urban Meyer is making people forget who Trevor Lawrence was. I think,
my goodness.
I think people forgot just how talented and just how gifted a prospect this kid is. And obviously he's AFC Offensive Player of the Week. How good is Trevor Lawrence for the people in Philadelphia?
I think you're right. People did forget about Trevor last year, and I think it was almost like a rookie minus year for him in terms of, he would have been better off, having stayed at Clemson, in my opinion, last season rather than go through what he went through. So, just going through an actual training camp and sort of understanding that he's a starting quarterback, you can tell that there's a change in mindset. Last year, after every press conference, he was down. He was like, I need to do better. I need to do this and that. And that led to his 17 interceptions, 12 touchdowns. This year, it seems like he has more control of what he's doing on the field. He's more accurate. I feel like last year, he let a few too many balls sail on him. Just a couple of weird moments in games where it just didn't seem like he could get it done. This year with Doug Pederson, with Press Taylor, with Mike McCoy, with the guys that are surrounding him, it just seems like he's been able to elevate his game to a level where, you saw some of that at Clemson. You saw, some of that when he was coming into the draft. And the reason why he was the number one overall pick, he can just make plays that other quarterbacks might struggle with, and I think that that's sort of what you've seen over the past 3 games, especially the most recent game against the Chargers, where, he threw 3 touchdowns. A couple of them were just incredibly impressive plays or throws. I think that that's sort of what you'll see moving forward. He's just got a better command of the offense. He has a better command of himself, and you can see it borne out on the field.
Demetrius, let me ask you about one of the weapons that Mr. Lawrence has been using this year, and that's tight end Evan Engram. We know Engram pretty well here in Philadelphia because he was a Giant for years. Even had a very famous drop against the Eagles that could have cost the Eagles a game, and you have to be quite happy if you're an Eagle fan. So he couldn't wrap his hands around it. That was the problem with Engram on the Giants. He'd make a big play, but then he'd drop a pass that was right in his hands. 15 targets, 12 catches this year. 12 catches is actually one more than Dallas Goedert has, which would surprise us here in Philadelphia because we think Goedert's a stone-cold stud at tight end. Engram-Lawrence relationship, better fit in the Pederson system, hasn't been racking up the big yards, but is making catches. How is Evan Engram fit down there in Jacksonville?
Yeah, Doug. I mean, he loves tight ends, and that's sort of why they brought in Evan. And you could tell, right off the bat in training camp that him and Trevor have had a great connection. Him, Trevor, Dan Arnold, the other tight end, just they bonded pretty well, and I think that that's sort of what you've seen over the past few weeks. I think against the Colts, he had around 7 or 8 receptions, and that's sort of what's going to happen. One game he might have 7 catches, another game he might have 2. But the biggest thing is, like you touched on, he hasn't been dropping passes. That's something that obviously was an issue back when he was with the Giants. In training camp, he dropped a couple of passes, which made Giants fans happy and Jaguar fans, wary. But, over the past 3 games, he hasn't been having any drops at all. So I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out moving forward, but I do know that Evan is a pretty big part of that offense. He's on the field for most of the plays, and him and Chris Manhertz, who's the blocking tight end, they play a lot of 2 tight end sets, and it's not just to run the football, that they're going to be passing out of those sets too. So I think that Evan, brings a different element to the Jaguars offense. I think that that's what sort of Trevor needed. He needed a guy that can be reliable over the middle of the field. So far, so good. So I think that that's something that, over the course of the season, we'll find out if that was a worthy investment. And but for now, it has been.
Demetrius, I saw at Jacksonville.com, you did a piece on Doug and 4th downs, because that's one thing where he was at the forefront. I mean, he was the guy. And Ryan Paganetti, who's a friend of this show and is now down with Doug in Jacksonville, they kind of pushed that issue. And I think, in the run to Super Bowl 52, that was a big part of it, their aggression. They were ahead of the curve. Now everybody started to catch up a little bit. Some have even gone even further, like Brandon Staley. But how impactful has Doug's aggression on offense been for the Jags?
Yeah, they've gone for it on fourth down 7 times. I would say one of them doesn't really count because it was at the end of a game. And they've converted 4 of them, and all 4 of those have turned into touchdowns. So 28 points already, they've earned by taking those risks, being aggressive, something that Doug has preached, and the players have responded well to it. A couple of players have said, this is something that gives us more confidence. The defense is sitting there like, the team is about to go for it on fourth down at the 50-yard line. We're ready to go. We're ready to go and get a turnover. I think that on 2 of the fourth downs they went for, they were able to stop the team, or I think all 3 of the fourth downs that they went for but didn't get it, they were able to stop the team for a 3-and-outs or a turnover. So I think that sort of aggression will be played out as the course of the season goes on to see if it was worth it. But so far they've been I would say one of the top teams in terms of taking those calculated risks and actually, getting points out of it or stopping them on the other end. So right now, everybody seems to be happy about the aggression. Of course, once they go for it on fourth down and it doesn't get done and it seemed like a risky situation, people might get a little bit more mad. But I think that you're right. That's sort of what he did. In 2017, going for it on fourth down, I think 26 times during the regular season, 29 times, obviously on the Philly special plays. So you have that change where sometimes it seems like there's not supposed to be a fourth down call for that play, but it ends up working out. I think that's something that the players have responded to, and that's what Doug is going to continue to do as long as he's a head coach.
Demetrius, one more offensive question out of me. I want to get your read on the Jaguars running back situation. Seems somewhat similar to the Eagles. That James Robinson is the lead back, much like Miles Sanders is here. You got a talented, come out of the backfield kind of guy. Travis Etienne, they used the first-round draft pick on 2 years ago. We're planning on making him wide receiver. Just another one of the Urban Meyer wacky revelations that didn't quite pan out, but is being used both to carry the football, but maybe more so coming out of the backfield. It seems to have worked pretty damn well to this point. How do you think the backfield rotation goes for the Jaguars this week against Philly?
Yeah, I think it's going to be similar to how it sort of played out over the past couple games. I think that James is going to be the guy who gets the, maybe 15 to 20 carries and Etienne's going to get those, 10 to 12 carries a game. I think that's something that they've liked over the past few games. I think that James coming back from that Achilles injury, no one really knew exactly how good he could be, over the first few weeks of the season. I think that everybody down here in Jacksonville, in the local media, understood that he will be back by week 1, but we didn't really know exactly how he was going to look. But he's looked great. That 50-yard run on fourth down last week was outstanding. That was probably something that was eye-opening for a lot of people in national and sort of the fans across the nation. So, he's been a guy who is reliable. He doesn't fumble the football very often. And I think that this year, without Urban and without all that nonsense, he's going to actually get his credit. He's actually going to be able to stay on the field when he's, doing well instead of going with a guy who probably was just there because he was a friend with the coach. So I think moving forward, Etienne is also going to be a major factor. I think that mostly he's going to be a factor in the pass game and the screen game, that sort of thing, kind of like a Boston Scott maybe. But, just in terms of that impact, I think that having them both split off is going to be what you see moving forward.
Demetrius, I kind of laughed about, and the Eagles already went through this with Detroit a little bit. The fault is everybody says, oh, it's the Lions. And, same thing with the Jags. Oh, it's the Jags. But when you draft at the top of the draft for a while, you sort of wake up one day and you go, oh, there's some talented people here. And, we talked about Trevor, but, this year it was Trayvon Walker and Devin Lloyd and Josh Allen the other Josh Allen is a heck of a player. What are the strengths of this team? What do you think they do best? What do you think they still need work at?
Yeah, especially defensively, on that defensive line, I would say that's probably their strongest group. They have a rotation, that has been working, especially inside. Roy Robertson Harris, Dewan Smoot, Devon Hamilton, Foley Fadakasi, who they brought in from the Jets earlier this spring. Those are guys that have made a lot of plays. Arden Key, he's a special type of player who can play inside at 240 pounds, which is just remarkable. But you're right. Josh Allen is a guy who, over the past couple of years, it didn't seem like he was, getting the production that you would have liked. During his rookie season, he had 10.5 sacks. Over the next couple of seasons, I believe he only had around 9 combined. So, that sort of transition this year, when now you have Trayvon Walker coming off the other side, you have a lot more players who can, sort of help him out almost by taking up blocks. Now he's getting more of one-on-ones. He's able to play within his game a lot better, and I think that's being shown over the first few games of the season. But the strength of this team really is, right now I would say centered on its defense, and then if you go over to the other side of the football on offense, I think that Christian Kirk, we haven't really talked about him too much yet, but he was a guy who was supposed to be a overpaid wide receiver. Everybody laughed at the move, but over the first 3 games of the season, he's turned out to be fantastic. I think he's been worth every penny so far. Obviously he has to still put up more numbers and produce and all that good stuff, but the guy really has a really close connection with Trevor. I think that he's somebody that's going to be relied upon over the course of the season. I think that he's somebody that you can rely on.
All right. Yeah, I do want to follow up on the defensive side. John asked you the question about Doug and his aggressiveness on offense, that he is was ahead of the curve with 4th down shots, and now is being copycatted somewhat around the league. How do you compare the aggressiveness on offense to Doug to the aggressiveness on defense? Jags are 2-1 because of both their offense and their defense. Is the defense as aggressive as the offense?
I think it's similar. They don't sell out every single play or anything like that. You're not going to see exactly the model that the Bucs use, where they're just going different kind of blitzes and things of that nature. But they're definitely aggressive on 3rd down. You could tell that they do a lot of stunts. They do a lot of game action on against the opposing offensive line, and I think that that's something that has had success for Jacksonville. Guys like Dewan Smoot, like I mentioned, guys like Arden Key are able to come in on 3rd down and sort of be those pass rushers inside, where then you have Trayvon Walker, you have Josh Allen, who's able to do the same. And we haven't seen it very much, but Devin Lloyd is another guy, out of Utah. He was able to rush off the edge plenty. So, he's a guy that can come in and sort of be that aggressive guy, getting after the passer too. So, they're pretty aggressive on defense. I wouldn't say that they're as aggressive in terms of whatever you would equivalent going forward on 4th down would be as the offense, but they're a very stout defense. They build themselves on stopping the run, and then once they can do that, they just get after the passer.
Want to talk about the coaching staff a little bit beyond Doug, Demetrius. Mike Caldwell was here back in the day as a linebacker and as an assistant with Doug Pederson. What's interesting to me is Mike was with Tampa Bay last year, and Todd Bowles came up with this brilliant game plan to deal with Jalen Hurts, and I've been surprised that nobody's tried to replicate it. Do you get the feeling that Mike is going to dip back into what Todd did in the playoffs, because Jalen's playing at an MVP level? And then Doug brought in 2 guys that are very, very close to Nick Sirianni. Mike McCoy, you mentioned before, Jim Bob Cooter, who was here last year. They kind of know where all the bones are buried, so to speak, when Nick Sirianni wants to do in high leverage situations. Have you guys sort of delved into those topics this week?
We haven't had a chance to talk to Mike yet, just because of the hurricane and things of that nature. But We talked to Doug about, his familiarity with him or the guys on his staff that are familiar with Nick, and I think that that's sort of something that they'll use. They've sort of downplayed the close connections thing. The week against the Colts, Press Taylor didn't really say too much about how much he knows that offense or things of that nature. But I think it does play a role. I think that the guys, when you go up against the same team as last year, like you said, Todd Bowles and the Bucks were able to figure out whatever the Eagles were going to do in that playoff game, and I think that that's something that Mike Caldwell hasn't forgotten. He seems like a very smart guy. He's a very even keel. I wouldn't call him a rah personality or anything of that nature, but he's clearly a bright young coordinator or young as in his first year as a defensive coordinator in this league, and I think that that's something that he's going to take from. He's already took from guys like Todd Bowles, who he's worked with. He's taken from other coaches that are celebrated in his past, and I think that that's something that moving forward you're going to see a lot of. I can see it this week. I don't know necessarily, or I don't want to say and predict that they're going to be able to, make the Eagles look like what they did against the Bucks last year. But it is something to think about, just because this is probably one of the better defenses, in my opinion, that the Eagles will face this season so far. So going up against a guy like Mike Caldwell, I guess this is his first test to see, what he's got.
Demetrius, we've either seen or read all of Doug Pederson's media availability. As you can understand, it's a pretty big deal up here. Super Bowl coach returning home for the first time. But give us the feel of Doug's communications with the players on the Jaguars this week. Do they know what Doug's history is here? Do they know how much this could potentially mean to him? Doug was an emotional guy when he was here, and he's done a good job, I think, of keeping his emotions in check this week. But has there been talk around the team about, hey, we got to go out and get this one for coach?
I think there's been some rumblings of that. I think that they know how important this can be, because if they were in a similar situation, they would want it to be that much more important.
Wait, whoa. Hold on. You telling me this team's going to go out and win one for Urban Meyer? No shot. No chance. That's not happening.
Yeah, maybe not for Urban, especially late in the year then. But yeah, for Doug, I think that there's a sense of, he's almost like, I think you guys called him like an uncle for the city of Philadelphia. I think that that's something similar to the Jaguars team. That they clearly love him. They clearly have a passion for doing well, not just for him, but for themselves as well. And I think that this week we actually asked Trevor about can you get a sense of Doug's importance for this game? And I think Trevor said I don't know what bad happened in Philly, or I know there was a lot of good things of that nature, but this is a week that obviously Doug is going to get hyped up for. He's going to be he wants to win. I'm sure this is probably something he's circled as soon as he signed on the dotted line in Jacksonville. So it's clearly an important game, and Doug undersells it and says I haven't even seen the statue and this and that. He makes it seem like it's not a huge deal, while it is a big deal at the same time. So I guess we'll see, during the game, we'll see his reactions. We'll see what the crowd reaction is with him. And then if they win or lose after the game, maybe he'll say something. If they win, maybe he'll say something like, I got him. If they lose, he's probably going to undersell it. That's sort of how it goes.
At Demetrius 82, follow Demetrius Harvey on Twitter. Read him at jacksonville.com. Does a tremendous job covering this team. I got to tell you, Demetrius, I didn't expect either of these teams to be as good as they've looked in the first 3 weeks. They're both in the top 10 all over the place. But one thing with the Jags has stuck out to me more than anything else when I saw it, and especially when you look at the dichotomy this week, because the Eagles are coming off a 9-sack week, that the Jags have given up 2 sacks all year, I believe, which is the least in the NFL. Now, they did bring in Brandon Sheriff, who's been a really good guard in this league for a really long time, but they're starting a rookie center. Cam Robinson's a good player. Juwan Taylor's a good player. Why have they been so good at protecting Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. And, over the past 2 weeks, they haven't allowed a single sack. I think they've allowed maybe one pressure. And that's going up against guys like Khalil Mack. And I know Joey Bosa didn't play the whole game, but he was out there too. And I think Juwan Taylor dominated him. So, it's just a situation where I believe they're in a better fitting scheme. They brought in Phil Rauscher, who obviously used to coach with the Vikings, used to coach with the Commanders. So he's a guy who understands the zone blocking scheme incredibly well under that Shanahan sort of tree. I think that's something that has helped this offensive line. You bring in a Brandon Sheriff. I think a lot of people forget, that's an all-pro player, and if he continues to play at this level and for a number of more years, he could be a Hall of Fame player. He's that good of a guard in my opinion, and I think that elevates guys like Juwan, that elevates guys like Luke Fortner, who's coming in as a rookie at center. I think that's sort of what we've seen. And then on the flip side, Trevor Lawrence, he's gotten the ball out of his hands incredibly fast. I think he had, a 2.8 seconds to get the ball out of his hands last year, and I think he's around 2.6 seconds this year. It doesn't seem like a lot, but those 0.2 seconds can be a lot because that's just an average. He's seeing the field faster. I think that they understand how to game plan with him. He's not holding on to the football, so just a combination of everything. And I think the one player on the offensive line that's just playing at an elite level so far, I think he's given up one pressure over the course of 3 games, Juwan Taylor. He's playing with a lot of motivation this year. Not only is his contract season, not only did he have competition with another player last year, but he lost his father in January, and that's something that he said publicly. That he's dedicated this season to his father, and I think that's something that's sort of been growing up in him, and why he's playing at a different level than he probably was over the past few seasons. So the whole offensive line has just they sort of gelled. They've come together. I think that this is probably their biggest test anyway. So we'll see. If they can come out and get another shutout as far as sacks, then I think that's a legitimate statement.
Demetrius, I want to thank you again for being as diligent as you were. Demetrius and I exchanging text. He goes, I don't know. We're going to be hit by this arc. I hope I got Wi-Fi to be able to hop on with you guys. And we tested out everything yesterday, and it worked out good yesterday and perfect today. How has the weather been down there in Jacksonville? Did it have any effect? Cancellation of practices, indoor practices, the Jags leaving same time as always. You guys a little north of where, of course, the hurricane came ashore in southern Florida. What kind of an effect has it had on your area?
Yeah, it's honestly we're kind of thankful in that the path sort of took it away from Jacksonville to an extent. Obviously the beaches are going to get rattled, and St. Augustine obviously is not going to do that well. But for the most part, we've been good. It hasn't really been that much of an impact on us, thankfully. I think that we're kind of in that little soft spot, I guess you can say, for hurricanes. So it's been solid. Yesterday the Jaguars sort of sped up things as far as their practice goes. They tightened the schedule so they can get the players out of there because the rain and the wind was still an issue. But other than that, it's been pretty good. I think that they're practicing normally. They're going to practice today, and then they're traveling on Saturday. So everything's been pretty good over here, thankfully.
Well, safe journey up here to Philadelphia. We thank you for coming on for a couple minutes here today. You gave us some real good insights on the Jags. Enjoy the game on Sunday.
Absolutely. You guys have a good one.